Round 15 of the URC and the scramble for playoff places begins in earnest. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. We're into the final stretch of the regular season in the URC. And, at this stage, you got a group of teams who are pretty much guaranteed to be in the playoffs. Group of teams who, for, all intents and purposes, have been eliminated. And then a small group in between who are fighting for those last places. They got 4 games to go. And, teams know you've got to be getting results. You've got to be picking up points every game to get, those last few coveted spots in those playoffs. So this weekend we got some, good matchups as well that will go to determine placings in the table and, have a big effect on who's going to be in prime position to get those playoff places as well. So what we're going to do is, as usual, we're going to go down through each of the games, talk about how the teams have gone over the last 7, and then make a prediction. So we're going to start with the Friday games. We've got 3 games on Friday, all 7:45 kickoffs. The first is Edinburgh versus Zebre Parma. This at the Hive Stadium. And, this one, you look at it and you've got, Edinburgh then in 13th place, not going to make the playoffs unless some kind of miracle happens. Zebre in last place, 16th, definitely not going to make the playoffs. Adrift now to Dragons as well, 9 points adrift to the Dragons in 15th place. So both teams really just looking, get some kind of momentum to take into next season, something to build on, that kind of thing. And given the way it is, like you look at how the teams have gone recently, Edinburgh, obviously eliminated in the round of 16 in the Champions Cup, but league form hasn't been great recently. They've won 2 of the last 7. Zebre have been on a 12-game losing streak in the URC. Edinburgh in their sequence they had a win against Benetton, then losses against the Bulls and Leinster, then a win against the Scarlets, and losses against Ulster, Lions, and then Stormers. And Zebre, their last 7, all losses. Benetton, then Glasgow again, Connacht, Munster, Scarlets, and then Ulster. And, given this as well, the fact that Zebre gone away from home, they haven't been great shakes away from home in the URC this year either. I got to go for an Edinburgh win in this one. But I think what this game will do is it'll kind of show with Edinburgh, the fact that the potential is there in that team. I think we talked about it when they got eliminated in the Champions Cup as well. Put in a brilliant effort despite losing. And I talked about it back then as well. That's what the Edinburgh fans want, is to see that, that determination, that graft in every single game. They're just too up and down. And, this season, last year, they obviously made it into the playoffs. They made it into the Champions Cup. This year, neither of those are going to happen. And again, just the roller coaster of Edinburgh continues on. But yeah, I'm going to go for an Edinburgh win in that one. Next time we have, for me, I suppose for a lot of Irish fans, the big game of the weekend, Ulster versus Leinster. This one at the Affidea Stadium. And yeah, you've got 2 teams at the minute, locked in the table. Ulster 3rd, Leinster 4th, both on the same amount of points. But this one has a feel that, the winner is going to be looking up the table towards Stormers and Glasgow, looking to take advantage of any slip-ups from them. But the loser is going to definitely be looking down the table, because they're going to be, with 3 games left in the scramble to try and either stay in the top 4 and maybe even reclaim the top 4, depending on, I think the Lions will probably pop up into the top 4 this weekend. So the loser may find themselves down in 5th place, trying to just reclaim that top 4 spot in those last 3 games. So it really is going to have a massive effect on the trajectory for either team for the rest of the regular season. And, we got Ulster, they won 4 of the last 7. Leinster won 5 of their last 7. And then the last 3, Ulster won 2. Leinster have only won 1. And Ulster's run, it's been a win against Munster, then loss against Scarlets, win against Cardiff, then lost against Ospreys, win against Edinburgh, loss against Connacht, and then a win against Zebre. And that Connacht win as well, Connacht's first win in 2 years in Interpro, so against another Irish province. But you've seen that pattern there, win-loss, win-loss, win-loss. So they're due, if the same pattern holds, they're due a loss in this one, which certainly won't be good for them going into the end of the season. Leinster, their run, they beat Munster, then they beat Connacht again, then they beat Edinburgh, loss against Cardiff, loss against Glasgow, and then a win against the Scarlets. Now, we've seen Leinster kind of coming into a bit of form recently, but the thing is that, it depends what team is going to play against Ulster. Is it going to be the what I call the URC team, the likes, if you're going to see the likes of maybe, Deegan, Penny, those kind of guys starting, or is it going to be the more akin to the team that's made it into the semi-final of the Champions Cup? Because the team that's made it into the Champions Cup, we've seen them over the last few weeks, getting their processes right and beginning to kind of click a little bit, get a bit of form, attack is starting to fire. But that's those players. The guys who potentially are going to play this game are more akin maybe to the team that lost to Glasgow. And if that's the case, that team has not been in form all year at all. So that could be a worry for Leinster. And those guys, if they're going to deliver for Leinster this season, this is the game to deliver in. But it might be a bit of a hybrid between the two. But yeah, Ulster at home, as I said, Leinster patchy form. It's a difficult one to pick, but I think just because Leinster are picking up that form, and sometimes even if it's not the same personnel, just that feel-good factor around the whole squad can actually up the players who weren't even involved on the big match days, and because of that, I'm going to go for Leinster to take the win in that one. On to the next one then. Dragons RFC versus Vodacom Bulls. This one is at Rodney Parade, and had this game happened maybe even a couple of weeks ago, I would have said, yeah, Bulls win next. But I don't think you can say that right now, because Dragons, been doing really well. They got themselves into a European semi-final, so got to be got to be some confidence in the group there, right? Because it's themselves and Ulster have both made the semi-final of the Challenge Cup, and Leinster, the only URC team that made the semi-final of the Champions Cup. So only one of 3 URC teams has actually made the European final this year. League form hasn't been great recently. They did have a bit of a bump there, kind of in the middle of the season. Come down a little bit from that, but again, the high of getting into a European semi-final could spur them on a little bit. The Bulls, they had a bit of a slump themselves, fell out of the playoff places, but they've found form recently and they've worked their way back up into that top 8. But at the minute, or the last 7, should I say, Dragons have won 1, drawn 1 of those 7. Vodacom Bulls have won 5 of their last 7, so definitely the form team between these two, if we just take URC into account. So Dragons in their run, lost to Cardiff, then they beat Scarlets, lost to Munster, lost to Ospreys, drew against Benetton, then they lost against the Stormers, and they lost against the Lions. The Bulls start their sequence with a loss against the Stormers, then they beat Edinburgh, they beat the Lions, they beat the Sharks, then the loss against the Stormers, they beat Cardiff, and they beat Munster. So the only team that they've lost to in that 7-game sequence is the Stormers. Now, they did do it twice, but still, they got to be feeling pretty confident. And generally, the Bulls coming up to play the Dragons, you would expect maybe that the Bulls would have enough to take the win, especially this time of the year where Dragons don't really have that much to play for. You got the Bulls again in contention for those playoff spots. I have a weird inkling that Dragons are maybe going to pull something off in this game. Maybe a close defeat or a win in it, but I'm going to back my head rather than my heart in this one and go for a Bulls win. Okay, so those are the Friday games. Let's get into the Saturday games next. So first game on Saturday, DHL Stormers versus Connacht. This is 12:45 kickoff. All kickoff times are giving are in Ireland, UK time, so check your local listings. It's at the DHL Stadium, and you've got, in this one, you got second place versus ninth place. So massive impact, for both these teams in terms of this result. Stormers looking to keep that pressure up on Glasgow. They know Glasgow are in South Africa as well, so it is a massive chance for the Stormers to overhaul them and get that number 1 seed going into the playoffs. Connacht, they're just behind the Bulls, 1 point behind them. And a win here, given how bunched it is down in that kind of from 6th down to 9th, there's just 4 points between them. 2 points between them. From 5th down is 4 points. So given how bunched it is, pretty much guaranteed if they did manage to somehow get a win, then they would leap up into that top 8, because not everyone in those 4 positions above them are going to win this weekend. So, again, just massive rewards for the winner of this one, and the loser potentially, going to have to really work hard to make up lost ground if they do lose this one, because, the Stormers you're thinking of, if they lose, then the winner of Leinster and Ulster will be right there, breathing down there next. Glasgow potentially could pull away, even if they don't get a win. If they get maybe a bonus point or 2, could stretch that lead out. For Connacht, a win, as I said, could potentially get them up into playoffs. A loss, and the goalposts will move a little bit for them. They'll find themselves at least a point or 2 further away from those playoff places, I would imagine. So looking at recent form, Stormers, they've won 4 of the last 7. Connacht have won 5 of the last 7. They've actually won 5 on the bounce in the URC as well. They were eliminated from the Challenge Cup semi-final by Montpellier at the weekend. So, that's certainly something that will kind of play on the minds of Montpellier. Have been the form team in that competition all season, but Connacht, have out of, I'm not going to say out of nowhere, because obviously Stuart Lancaster and his coaching team have, bred this consistency into them finally. But it's a long sequence, 5 wins. Maybe it's going to end in this one, but let's have a look at how the teams did in the last 7. So starting with the Stormers, beat the Bulls, then 3 losses in a row. The Sharks back-to-back twice, then the Lions, then they beat the Bulls again, then they beat the Dragons, and they beat Edinburgh. Connacht started their sequence, loss against Leinster, a loss against Leinster again. Then they beat Zebre, beat Glasgow, beat Scarlets, beat Ulster, and they beat Ospreys. So a decent sequence for them there. But yes, Stormers at home, and Stormers looking again, potentially to keep that pressure up on Glasgow at the top of the table. I think it's a tough one, even though Connacht have won 5 on the bounce, a tough one to ask them to get another win here as well. Then in South Africa, it would be a famous win if they could do it, but I'm going to go for a Stormers win, but I think Connacht will certainly get, well, not certainly, but I think they will get at least 1 bonus point out of the game. Okay, on to the next game, and it is the Lions versus Glasgow Warriors. This is a 3 o'clock kickoff at Ellis Park. And yeah, you got the Lions, who have been, one of the form teams in the league, worked their way all the way up to top 5, looking to break into that top 4. And they're playing the Warriors, who, have been top of the table. They basically, at this stage, Warriors know if they can come out of, they've got 2 games South Africa. If they come out the other side of that and they're still top of the table, they're, odds-on favourites to be number 1 seeds going into the playoffs. So they've got to give it their all down there in South Africa and get something out of these games. Again, it's not necessarily going to be a win, but they know they can't get nilled in terms of match points in these games. They've got to get something out of each of their games. Potentially, you would imagine Glasgow will be thinking, go down there, try to at least get bonus points in both of the games and try to win 1 of your 2 games down there. That would be a pretty successful tour for any team going down to South Africa. So, but as I said, 2 of the 4 teams in the league, Lions have won 5 and drawn 1 of their last 7, and Glasgow have won 6 of the last 7. So both teams only lost 1 of the last 7 games. So, both teams will have that whole kind of mentality of, not being beaten, that kind of thing. Glasgow, though, are coming back, are coming off the back of that disappointing performance against Toulon, where I felt if they played to their potential, they would be in a European semi-final against Leinster at home as well. But for me, they absolutely blew the chance there. Now it's a case of, park that and get yourselves back into the right mindset to make sure that you stay top of the league. Whether they can do that or not, though, is another thing, because I think that would be a big mental blow for them, honestly. Because it's one of these things where a hugely talented team, and they've shown under Franco Smith development every single season, and I think they certainly have shown development this season as well. But they've won the URC previously, getting over that kind of mental block. They've been performing in the Champions Cup pool stages. They finished, as number 2 seeds there, get themselves into their quarterfinal, and you're thinking, yeah, they're favourites at home against a Toulon team who scraped through. Just play to your potential and you're going to win, but they weren't able to do it. But still, it's definitely a step forward for them at Champions Cup level. But, it is at the same time a bit of a major knock, the fact that they went into that quarterfinal as favourites and they weren't able to bring it home. So it'd be interesting to see how this one goes. But if we look at their sequences, the Lions, they beat the Sharks, then a draw against Ospreys. Their only loss in their sequence against the Bulls, then wins against the Sharks, Stormers, Edinburgh, and then the Dragons. Glasgow, then in their sequence, wins against Edinburgh, Zebre again, Munster, loss against Connacht, win against Leinster, and then a win against Benetton. But I think there's one big factor in this as well. If you look at the Lions results this year, most of their wins and their good performances come in South Africa, not necessarily at home because they performed well, away to the other South African teams too. But there is a big contrast between their form in South Africa and their form in Europe. the fact that this is in South Africa, I'm going to back the Lions to win. But again, I think Glasgow certainly will be thinking, that they need to get something out of the game. So I do think Glasgow will come away with some kind of bonus point from that game. Next then, on to the next game, Welsh Derby, Scarlets versus Cardiff. It's a 5:30 kickoff at the Parky Scarlets. And, we're looking at this. We got the Scarlets down in 14th place, basically looking to finish as high up the table as they can. Realistically, I think, maybe 11th or 12th would be, as high as they probably can finish in the table at this stage. And then they've got the Dragons on the same points to them, so obviously they don't want to drop any further down the table. Cardiff, they've been up there, in top 4 for most of the season. They're starting to fall away now. They need a result to keep them in that mix because, at the moment, they're in 6th place. They got Munster in the same amount of points. They got the Bulls 1 point behind, Connacht just 2 points behind, and potentially, the Sharks as well, who are 8 points behind, but a run and, a real loss of form for Cardiff could see them completely miss out on the playoffs. And that would be, a bit of a disaster for the end of the season for them. Again, given the fact that they've been up there, top 4 on the table for so long. Scarlets won't care about that. Scarlets will see it, playing against their rivals. They want to beat them. Their, season effectively is over in terms of not really much to play for, but you get to this point of the season and that's where you start laying your groundwork for next season. We have seen an uptick in Scarlets' performances recently as well, which is not ideal for Cardiff. And we've seen their attack causing a lot of issues for opposition. We've also seen them being more dogged than they've been for a lot of the season, more akin to the way they were last season when they finished in the top 8. And a lot of that is not good news for Cardiff. But if we look at the last 7, Scarlets have won 2 and drawn 1 of the last 7. Cardiff won 3 of the last 7. So sequences, Scarlets lost to the Dragons, then they beat Ulster, draw against Benetton, they lose to Edinburgh, lose to Connacht, then win against Zebre, and then they lose to Leinster. But that performance against Leinster was pretty good, honestly. Cardiff then beat the Dragons, lose to Ospreys, they beat Benetton, lose to Ulster, beat Leinster, they lose to the Bulls, and then they lose to the Sharks as well. So looking at this, Scarlets at home, even though Cardiff do need to get something out of the game, just think Scarlets at home, they'll want to give the fans something to cheer towards like the end of the season. And, given the whole turmoil that's gone on in Welsh rugby as well, I think Scarlets are going to produce performance and I'm going to back a Scarlets win there. Okay, next time we have Benetton versus Munster. This is a 7:45 kickoff on Saturday. It's at the Stadio Monego. And in this, normally you go back, like even last year you go back and Munster are playing Benetton around this time of year. And it was basically shootout between the two for who was going to make it into the playoffs. Munster won that game. I think it was down in Cork. And they're ones that qualified. This time, though, Benetton, they're 12 points adrift of the Bulls in 8th place. Again, only 4 games left to go. And because it's so bunched between those teams, it's very hard to see them, again, you're looking at kind of miracle type thing. Even if they get 20 points, so win all 4 games that have left with bonus points, they go on to 48. And that's kind of thereabouts for the playoffs. It might even be enough to get them in there. So got to think that at this stage they're out of it unless things start shaping that way for them. At the minute though, I think you can kind of rule them out. Then Munster, another team who, early on the season, right up the top there, top 2 themselves, and the Stormers have been drifting down the table though. in recent weeks. Find themselves in 7th place, just a point above the Bulls, just 2 points above Connacht, who are in 9th place, and just 8 points above the Hollywoodbets Sharks, who are in 10th. So they know they've got to keep that momentum going. They've got to keep getting themselves points. Performances, though, recently have been very poor, both in Europe and in the URC as well. They've got to find something from somewhere, though, to keep them in contention. So we look at the last 7. Benetton won 2, drawn 2 of the last 7. Munster, just 2 wins in 7 games. So Benetton beat Zebre, then lost against Edinburgh and Cardiff, then draws against the Scarlets and Dragons. They beat Ospreys, and then they lost against Glasgow. Munster, losses against Leinster and Ulster, then a win against the Dragons, lost against the Warriors, won against Zebre, lost against the Sharks, and lost against the Bulls. So looking at it, Munster, the only 2 wins in their last 7 games have come against the bottom 2 teams in the league. So that tells you how poor the form has been, really. But it's another one where it just got a feeling that we're going to see a Munster performance this weekend, and they're going to get a win that really kind of solidifies them a little bit more in those playoff places. So I'm going to go for a Munster win in that one. Now, on to the final game of the weekend, Ospreys versus Hollywoodbets Sharks. This one's 7:45 kickoff as well on Saturday. Is at the Electric Brewery Field. So we got Ospreys in 11th place, the Sharks in 10th place, and both these teams, have certainly, I would say, outside chances of making the playoffs, because Sharks 7 points behind the Bulls, who are in 8th. It's certainly possible to make 7 points up in 4 games. Ospreys 10 points back from the Bulls, so 3 points extra back than the Sharks. Again, it's possible to make that up. Ospreys get to 50 points, Sharks get to 53 points, but you're talking about being perfect for the rest of the season and hoping that other results go your way as well. Because if you look at Ospreys, they need 4 wins with bonus points to get to 50. Let's take the Bulls, who are currently on 40. Well, if the Bulls get a couple of bonus point wins, that's them on 50 already, and then just have to get a point out of their other 2 games, and that would be enough to put them out of reach. So it is a big stretch for either of these teams to make it, but basically outside chances for both teams. But the loser, I think the outside chance is gone, because if Ospreys win, they do leapfrog the Sharks up to 34 points. But then at that stage, we're going to have 3 games left for each team as well. They could get to 35, obviously, with a bonus point win. But 33 points with 3 games left, and potentially having to, instead of make up 7 points, maybe 9 or more points. Again, feels like a big stretch. And Ospreys, even if they get to 35, potentially it's still going to be 9 or 10 points for them to make up, depending on where that team in 8th place, how many points they actually have at the end of this weekend. But again, something that I think is absolutely certain is that the loser of this, you can pretty much rule them out of a playoff spot. The winner, again, is I don't think they're not really putting themselves in position to make the playoffs. What they're doing is putting themselves in a position to make that kind of run that we saw Ospreys do a couple of years ago, where they won the last 2 games to make it into the playoffs against all the odds. That's kind of the shot that the winner has. So it's not even that great of a chance to make the playoffs after that. But Ospreys have won 4 of the last 7 and drawn 1, and Sharks have won 4 of the last 7. So Ospreys, their run win against Scarlets, win against Cardiff. They drew then against the Lions, win against the Dragons, win against Ulster, and then losses against Benetton and then Connacht. The Sharks then lost against the Lions, beat the Stormers again, lost against the Lions, lost against the Bulls, a win against Munster, and then a win against Cardiff. So, you look at that sequence, and it's been a long time since the Sharks have actually played a game outside of South Africa. So the fact that they're travelling now up to Ospreys, that certainly could be a factor, I think, in this game. As I said, both teams still harbouring outside chances of making the playoffs, but the loser, I think you can almost write them off. But Ospreys at home, the fact that Sharks haven't played outside of South Africa in so long, I'm going to go for an Ospreys win. Okay, so that's the end then of our predictions or our look forward to the weekend. We'll cover what games that we can. Certainly looking at the games over the weekend. So Friday, Ulster versus Leinster. I think I'll cover that. Then Saturday we'll see, because I've got other things on. So I'll see which games I can cover. Probably won't be able to cover the early one, the Stormers Connacht one. Be one of the middle games and probably the later game, the Benetton Munster game. So we'll see how many of those we get to cover. But as usual, we will have a full review of the round, once all the games are over, either on Sunday night or Monday night. But let me know what you think down in the comments.